Hello, my name is Gavin Halliday, the Senior VP and Head of Platform Development for HPCC Systems, and I'd like to welcome you all to the 10th Annual HPC Systems Community Summit. We have a great day ahead of us showcasing our community, filled with informative talks and technical breakout sessions. The talks are recorded, but that doesn't mean communication is only one way. Please take the opportunity to interact and engage with our speakers in the chat throughout the sessions. Feel free to ask questions, give feedback, or any other comments. And don't let the discussions stop there. Please continue them after today. After all, this day is all about building and equipping the HPC systems community. It's an opportunity for us to come together and share what we're doing with the platform across industry, academia, and our business. But that's enough of an introduction. Let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Bill Franks, the Director of the Center for Data Science and Analytics at Kennesaw State University. Bill is the author of several books and publications, a sought-after speaker. He is a frequent blogger and top influencer, being an inaugural inductee into the Analytics Hall of Fame. His work has spanned clients in a variety of industries ranging from Fortune 100 companies to small non-profit organizations. With these credentials, we are honored to have him present today on a topic that everyone is talking about, generative AI. After Bill's keynote, Bahar Fardanian from our Customer Solutions Lab will introduce our second keynote speaker, Gus Cawley, the founder and CEO of ZipApply. You're going to hear an enlightening discussion on how his company is using HPC systems to help job seekers find the optimal employer. We've had some great use cases from the community, and this one is truly compelling. I'll be back later after the keynotes, but for now, it's my pleasure to welcome Bill Franks. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentations.
Well, thanks so much for having me today, and welcome everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about generative AI. Obviously, it's been one of the hottest topics of this year, 2023, for certain, and I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. The reality is, as with every new technology, there's a ton of hype out there, even some hysteria, and I'm going to hopefully give you some food for thought in terms of how to think about it a little differently, a little more pragmatically, some ideas on how you could implement it in your business, and also help to dispel some of the common misunderstandings that people have about generative AI. So first, I'm not going to really spend much time on this because I think everybody knows what generative AI is, but just to be clear, because I think ChatGPT has been getting such press, ChatGPT is in fact a form of generative AI and it's generating text. But as many of you are probably aware, there's similar applications that generate code, images, video, music, etc. And so when I'm talking about generative AI, at times I'll focus on one or the other types of these applications, but virtually all of the lessons I'm going to talk about apply across all of these because there's a lot of similarities in the algorithms. A couple of the specific issues I'll talk about probably deal more with text generative AI like ChatGPT, but just keep in mind this is the whole umbrella. Now, there's one thing to think about that I think is a key differentiator of generative AI and part of why it's gotten so much excitement. So if you go back 10 years ago to when big data hit and became a big thing, one of the things that made big data so exciting was it enabled a bunch of different data sources and different types of data sources to be used for analytics. So we were able to handle not just bigger data, but also different data. We were able to use text for the first time, images, et cetera, and that enabled new use cases. There's also something distinct about generative AI, and it's this. Most historical analytical algorithms from machine learning, even AI, were used to either predict or forecast or classify something. So I would be predicting who is or isn't going to respond to a given campaign, who will or won't default on a loan. Is that image a cat or is it not? What are your customer segments? So algorithms were traditionally focused on taking a bunch of existing data, building some type of a model, and then you're getting a new data point, and whether it be an image or a new customer record, and you're going to either predict something or classify or forecast. What generative AI is doing is actually generating new data. Instead of taking an existing data point and then classifying or predicting something about it, it's taking a prompt that you've provided and then going to generate a new instance of data that doesn't actually exist, but that statistically looks like the others. That's how you end up with an image that you requested that has the specifications you've asked for, even though that picture wasn't taken. That's how ChatGPT will generate an answer to a question that you might have. And the key here then is this is fundamentally a new capability, this idea of an algorithm that will generate new data based on the patterns of the underlying data at your request. And that starts to open up some different use cases and some different opportunities than the classic, predicting and not predicting forecasting. And like I say, even with AI, most AI had been applied to the same thing. Is this image a cat or is that image not a cat? And it's already starting to disrupt industry. This is an actual screenshot from a real website. And if you look at the top right, there's a little green box and arrow, and it says, these models do not exist. So this is a virtual modeling agency. You can sign up. I think their plan started at $29 a month. And instead of having to go to some exotic locale, hire a bunch of often high maintenance models and fly them there along with a very expensive photographer and equipment and so forth and spend a bunch of money, you can have generated models. You can place them in whatever environment you want, and you can get pictures pretty quickly. Now, this is an early version, so this isn't going to pose a big threat to the modeling industry as it exists today, but it shows the general direction and path that people are going. And so this is a pretty big deal where you can get any model you want of any type that you want. And one interesting thing, if you think about clothing, a lot of clothing today, even on sites like Amazon, it won't have a model in it. It'll just be a picture of the clothing. And that's largely driven by the costs of actually having models. And if there is a model, there's one model. So with generative AI, you'll be able to have a site where you can go and ask to see a piece of clothing, where you can ask for a model that has your skin tone, your hairstyle, your facial hair, your weight, etc., so that you can see better what it looks like on you. And in fact, with these kind of sites, you can even upload pictures of yourself and effectively make yourself the model. So there's a lot of interesting things going on with this, where there's some real good upside in terms of new things you can do. There is some risk, of course, to some of the traditional revenue streams that photographers and models in this case had. Many people on this on this session are going to either be coders or work closely with coders of some kind. Of course, generative AI is being applied for code as well, to generate new code. And there's actually been studies by a number of big companies. I think it was, might have been Deloitte did one. I think some of the tool vendors have done studies showing that coders were actually substantively more efficient when they used a code generator alongside themselves coding everything. And tools like GitHub are now putting code generators embedded within their product. Now, a couple of cautions here. I think like any low-code tool of the past, I'm a big believer that you have to be able to look at the code that you're given and to make sure that it actually is doing what you asked it to do. So just like a BI tool would generate SQL to make a report, you had to know how to look at that SQL and make sure it's actually giving what you expect if you're going to be effective with it. I think the same thing here. You can use generative AI to ease the process of writing code. I like it a lot too. I used to cut and paste code from myself all the time. This is another way to grab snippets of code that might be useful, but you still are going to have to look at that code and validate it personally that it's doing what it purports to do if you're going to use it properly. But a lot of opportunity here. And I think this is going to, continue to evolve. And one of the things that's happening very rapidly is how seamlessly this functionality is getting embedded in applications. So this is a screenshot of Adobe software. And Adobe, they've introduced Firefly. If you think about it, Adobe's been used by creators for years, and they have huge stock footage of images and videos, et cetera. And there's interfaces, same as in PowerPoint and so forth, that you can go and search and find images. Well, it was very seamless for them to take and add what looks visually to be almost the exact same interface you're used to dealing with, only when you add the prompt up top, instead of matching keywords to real images that match that prompt, it'll generate you an image, and you can select the ones that you want to embed in your specific project. So that's a really key thing to keep in mind here, is this seamless functionality where the users, for example, of the Adobe software may not even really be aware that they're using such sophisticated AI behind the scenes. I mean, they're going to know they're generating an image, but they don't have to know a thing about how those images are generated or how the AI is working, how the code underneath the app is working. They just have to know how to ask for and get the kind of pictures that they want. One thing that's neat too is Adobe's working on building in metadata within the image it generates that will declare that it was in fact generated. This is a big issue in the industry today, is how do we know what's been generated and what's real? They're planning to encode within their images. So unless somebody will hack the image to remove that watermark, it'll be very clear who generated it and when. And this brings up a very interesting scenario of what is fair use of the training data. So there's already been lawsuits all over the place around these models and the data they scraped off the internet, both images and text. In fact, Google had a music model. I think I heard they might have finally released it on a very limited scale, but they've been holding it back because they knew that they were going to get sued over the fact that they trained their music model on songs, and it's still ambiguous what's fair. But I'm going to give a counterintuitive viewpoint on this, or let's say not a counterintuitive, a contrarian perspective, which is this. If I go to school to study art, what's one of the main things we focus on doing? We look at artists of the past. We understand how they did things, why they did it, how their style works. And then over time, we're encouraged to develop our own style based on what we've learned. Similarly with music, it's very common to hear a musician openly say, I was heavily influenced by musician A and musician B. And in their music, you can even hear those influences, but nobody accuses them of stealing from those people. It's considered an honor that they've borrowed some of the style of those people that they respected so much. So my point is that we also learn and develop our own style by incorporating everything we've seen and heard in the past. Now, you can't go too far. So years back, there were in the early days of sampling in music, like in rap music in particular. I remember Vanilla Ice had the song Ice Ice Baby, and he sampled from a David Bowie song. David Bowie sued and actually won a case because they said, you too directly sampled too much of this song without giving it credit, and that's not fair. So I'm not saying that generative AI should be able to do anything. But what I will say is this, I don't think it should have stricter rules than we would have. And so if I'm going to be an artist or a musician, I could study, let's say, tens of thousands of instances of songs or paintings over my lifetime realistically. And so everything that I'm creating is based off, let's say, 10 or 20,000. Well, these generative AI models have literally looked at virtually millions, tens of millions of images in every song ever created. So I'd argue that generative AI is stealing a little bit less from every example it's seen in its training data than we steal from in using our training data. But still, this is a very thorny issue that it's going to take a long time for the courts to decide. But back to Adobe, I think they're going to be a runaway winner in the generative AI, at least as it comes to images, because they for years had fully licensed stock image libraries, and they built their own generative AI image package, and they're working on a video one as well that only uses those fully licensed images. There is no ambiguity that they have full rights to that. And so what they're going to be able to do, and they are, is going out really hard with this product, and it's safe. In fact, they've gone so far now as to offer legal indemnification. They've said, if you use our product, you won't get sued because we have full rights to this. If you do get sued, we will cover any costs, and we will cover this because they're that sure. So that's a big thing. And I think over time, there will be some other companies that will come up with ways around some of these issues. But in the meantime, I think they've got a big lead on these other vendors. One thing to be incredibly cautious of, though, are the policies of these generative AI tools. And these are evolving literally by the week. But what I have here is a screenshot of me asking ChatGPT whether I should tell ChatGPT confidential information, and it strongly recommends I not do that. And when it was first released, anything you put in a prompt, you were giving OpenAI full rights to all of that. And so there have been documented cases. I think Samsung was one where people were putting proprietary information, let's say a meeting, a core strategic planning meeting, putting that into a prompt and saying, clean up these notes for me. That becomes part of the training data, and it leaked out to some other people, and it caused a mess for Samsung. Similarly, there's been some code that has leaked where someone asked for code that did something similar to what another company had entered, and parts of that code that were identifiable came out. Now, since then, they've adopted, I think you can pay extra now as a company, and they will not have rights to whatever you put in, et cetera. But it's changing very rapidly. You have to be very, very cautious, both as a company, what you're doing at work, but as an individual, if you're using these tools at home, to make sure you understand what the policy is as to what you're giving up in return for getting the benefits. And it started out pretty skewed towards the providers. I think it'll start to balance, but you've got to be careful. And keep in mind, these are getting updated frequently. So what was true today might not be true next month. And if you're going to use these tools heavily, keep on top of it. Another thing that's intriguing is AI detectors do not work well at all. There's been a lot of press about these saying, oh, we have something that's going to detect ChatGPT generated text or fake images. And the reality is this is very much an analog to virus battles with computers and security. As soon as I come up with a way that I can tell that is an AI generated image or text snippet, guess what's going to happen? The generators of those things will work their tools not to do that anymore. But worse, here's a picture of two different tools flagging the U.S. Constitution as almost certainly fake, and one of them flagging verses from the Bible as almost certainly fake. The logic behind this was that the Constitution and the Bible aren't really written in a modern English form, et cetera, and so the tools would find them suspicious. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, I did a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks back. One of the sites I post my blog to, they do an automated AI check, and they've been doing this for a while. And I get flagged routinely. It's about a 50-50 that I'm either 90% human or I'm 90% AI. In fact, my blog yesterday was flagged as less than 10% chance of being human. I don't know what I'm doing differently. It's me writing all of these blogs. So don't rely on these. By the way, OpenAI took theirs down, I think, in the last 2 weeks because they said it worked so poorly, they didn't even want their name on it. So keep this in mind. And naturally, what's happened is you have people who don't know what they're doing, like professors and teachers who have used this to identify students who supposedly plagiarized with a ChatGPT or similar tool set when the students hadn't, but students have gotten expelled or put up in front of honor boards and all kinds of nightmares, and trying to prove that they did not cheat, they hadn't used AI, and it's because these tools just aren't very good. And all this leads to the inevitability that AI ethics legislation is coming very, very fast. As usual, we're way ahead of the laws. There are pretty serious proposals in Europe, here in the States, in Asia. In Europe, they have what's called the EU AI Act. It's going to take, I don't understand how their political system works completely, but a few weeks ago, it passed another hurdle towards eventual passing, but it's not law yet. Here in the States, we have an AI Bill of Rights. There's a screenshot here that's from the administration, but it's just suggestions at this point. There's no legal teeth to this. You can anticipate that there will be legal teeth to a lot of these things very soon. So start to keep up on this if your companies using AI of any type, not just generative AI. Keep up on this. And there's certain components that are consistent across countries and that just make sense. And they're going to become law. Start to build in your processes, some of those obvious things that you can take to the bank, you're not going to be able to avoid. And that way you're ahead of them and you're not going to end up having to do a lot of remediation later. So one of the biggest misunderstandings of generative AI is this idea of hallucination. So here's a screenshot of an article where The Guardian, a big publication over in Europe, started exploring and found out that, ChatGPT would make up articles. And, the key is ChatGPT is not a search engine. So if I type into Google, find me articles that Bill Franks wrote, it's going to go out and find literal links, literal papers or PDFs, et cetera, that are purported to be written by me. Now, it doesn't mean someone couldn't make a fake paper under my name. And it doesn't mean that it might not find something that was by someone with a similar name, but it's attempting to actually find you real links. What generative AI is doing, it's in the name. It's literally generating an answer probabilistically. And so it'll often spit out, it's a real publication. It's a person who actually does do writing for that publication. And it's an article that sounds like it might come from that person. But maybe that article is completely made up, and even the URL, the link to the article, is completely made up. And so that's the thing you have to keep in mind, is that your answer is being probabilistically generated. It's not a cut and paste. It's not trying to match it. And so you can get fake stuff. Now, the funny thing is, people, of course, make up fake things too. So I don't know that this makes generative AI worse than people who can intentionally or unintentionally make up fake things, but you gotta be aware of it. I've also noted, though, that people are more aware of this with text than with images. For some reason, we all get that the image of the video we request was fake. Like, we get that. I just asked generative AI, it made up this image for me. Yet when we see the text, we somehow forget that it just made up that text. And what this leads to is that it's really pretty much all hallucination. Every answer you get from ChatGPT, sometimes and often, shockingly, it actually gives you a hallucination that's mostly, if not completely, accurate. But that's not always going to be the case. It's going to sometimes give you things flat out wrong, or 90% of it will be right, and parts of it will be wrong. So this is the most important thing to understand about these engines, is that it's making up an answer from scratch every single time. You could have a document with the exact answer to that question in the training data. There's no guarantee it's even going to say anything like it, and it's certainly not going to cut and paste it. So to me, the fascinating thing and the amazing thing is that making up an answer probabilistically still ends up getting you answers that are really good a lot of the time. And that stems in many ways from the training data. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But when you have consistent training data with facts that are consistently supported by a variety of sources, it's going to do it. But just keep that in mind. While a search engine might give you documents and links that don't match exactly what you want all that well, they're giving you real things. Generative AI is not. And to help you see this is something I from my blog, just from yesterday. Here I asked, tell me the history of the world in 50 words. And you can see at the top in the gray, I got one answer. As soon as that answer came back, so we're talking a span of 5 seconds maybe, I submitted the exact same question again, and then I got a completely different answer. There are a couple of consistent facts within those answers. Each of them have different things the other didn't mention, and they're just very, very different in form and style. And you might say, well, how can that be? Back to it. It's making up an answer every time. Now, here's the key. A lot of people think it's going to give you the most probable answer, word by word by word. Research found that doesn't work very well. You end up with very boring, not human-like answers, albeit your answer to this question would be the same every single time. But what all of these tools have is a setting that you can basically say how much randomization to stick into the model. And in practice, what they end up doing is often picking from a set of the most probable words, not literally the most probable word. And what that does then is I pick each word and I start it by the second or third word. I have one word different this round. That word then changes the underlying math and makes it more likely you're going to get yet different words. And so it's intentionally injecting randomness, these applications do, and that leads you to getting the same question, completely different answers. And in particular, again, if there's a question where there's divergence of information. And so is there a way to tell what ChatGPT is going to get right and wrong prior to when you do things? And the answer is yes, in many cases. So first of all, the topic recency. The current large language models in particular cut off around the end of 2021. I don't think this is as big of a problem for image models because there's not much reason to believe that images or video are going to be massively different in recent times, but text certainly is. So things from before 2021, you might get decent answers, but you start asking ChatGPT about the Ukraine war, which started after that, it's not going to do very, very well because of two things. One, it's only going to have limited training data from prompt set render and such. And also there's a lot of conflicting information on the Ukraine war, and that makes it probabilistically harder to tell what the consensus is. Obscurity matters. So if I want to ask questions about World War II, and I want to ask about Pearl Harbor or Winston Churchill, highly documented event, highly documented person, very consistently documented, then probabilistically, when I ask about Winston Churchill, while the specific syntax of the answer will vary from those randomness, the general points will come out highly consistent. If I ask about some obscure battle from World War II or some obscure colonel that is not well documented, not well known, I could end up with a bunch of junk. So really, back to how amazing it is ChatGPT lucks into the right answer so much. Really, a lot of the questions people tend to ask are questions that are well documented with consistent answers, so that the probabilities work out nicely. But the more obscure or thinly documented, the worse you'll do. The more you want a fact versus subjectivity, the better it might do as well. So people freaked out that maybe this thing's almost sentient because it does so well on tests like an SAT. But you got to remember, an SAT asks a very specific question. It's easy to understand. And then there's 4 options from which to choose. And there's a fact somewhere out there that tells you, what that answer might be, especially for some of the questions that are, the English questions or the language-based questions. But when you want something super subjective, like what would be the implications of this type of genetic manipulation on bacteria? Again, if there's it might not be well documented. B, there's subjectivity and or conflicting data. And then the last is math and other computations. This is really important. ChatGPT does not know how to do math. It probabilistically comes up with an answer. If I say what's 1 + 1, in its training data, it's seen a 2 enough after it that it's probably going to give you a 2, but it didn't compute it. The harder your math problem, the less likely ChatGPT will get it right. And there's been well-documented cases you can find where even more complicated math, it'll kind of sort of get it mostly right. Maybe there's 20 steps. 16 of them might even be right, or 18 of them, but it'll make a mistake somewhere, but it's a critical mistake that'll make the whole answer wrong. So you do not want to use ChatGPT, the base app, as a code generator. Now, here's what's interesting then. All of these things lead to real bad problems. So about a month ago, there was a lawyer in New York. Imagine the humiliation here. He, like students have done, he generated a ChatGPT output to help him put together an argument for the court. And the judge and the opposing counsel said, we can't find these cases that you're referencing here. Well, it ends up, he asked ChatGPT for some references. It made some up that didn't exist, as it will do. This lawyer didn't double check it. So he was in court, and here's what he had to argue to the judge. Judge, please believe me, I didn't purposely lie to the court and make this up, because that would be a felony and also get him disbarred. Instead, I was just an idiot who used a tool I didn't understand, didn't double check it, and just put it in to the court. I'm simply an utter idiot. I believe he won the battle and had the judge concede he was an idiot, but his career's a bit ruined. So I remember reading a real interesting article. What some teachers have done is to help students not abuse this tool, they'll tell the students, go out on this topic we just studied, ask ChatGPT to make you an essay on it. And in the one example, the teacher said every single student had at least one factual error they could identify in what they got back. And they were all stunned because they've been hearing how perfect this tool is. And they realized I better not use output from ChatGPT as is. So the moral of the story is here, if you're going to use it, double check it. Now, one of the biggest issues about these models is people are worried about what they call model collapse. And on the top, you can see like the purple and yellow are 2 different data distributions, but over time of having the original training data getting polluted with all kinds of generated data, the distribution changes and disappears. And on the bottom, you can see numbers generated from a generative model that was based on real writing, but over time, as it polluted itself with more and more of the numbers it generated, it gets blurry and eventually gets bad. And the reason is that the models of any kind will tend to regress to the mean. They're looking at probabilities, they're looking at averages. And so our real data has a distribution. As we generate new data based on that data, it's going to start to go more and more towards the middle. So we're going to have to come up with ways and be very careful over time, because we're soon going to have more generated data than we have real data. And if we're not able to differentiate the generated data from the real data, all of these models will start to collapse and converge in nonsense. So the future of all this is plugins and ensemble approaches. So in data science, it's been for years, we've been using ensemble approaches, meaning instead of just running a decision tree or a neural net, we would run a bunch of different types of models. And studies showed that if you take the estimates from a variety of models and average them, you'll actually get a better answer on average than any of them would be individually. I think it'll be the same thing here. There's going to be a handful of well-known, of widely available language models or image models, and an ensemble approach will say, let's get the output from each of those and then find a way to mix them together to get a good answer. But on top of that, back to some of these holes are plugins. So Wolfram, who has Wolfram Alpha, a high-end math and computational engine, they've got a plugin now where ChatGPT, the app, will recognize a formula and then pass it to Wolfram, so Wolfram can actually do the math, because it does do math, and pass back the answer. And we'll start to see a bunch of various plugins that are available for things like chemistry, things like certain types of math, where the app that's, because remember, ChatGPT is an application around a large language model. It's not the model itself. These apps will have a lot more sophistication. And what this will lead to is this idea of mixing and matching real data. I don't want a chatbot. This is my blog from this week. If I'm a hotel, I don't want a chatbot generating a random answer, a probabilistic answer to the cancellation policy where everyone's getting a different answer. I need the actual cancellation policy to get back. So what we'll see is a mix of language models being used to understand my question, but then having it pass off and pull in a real answer to what that cancellation policy is, or getting the real room availability and rate information. You'll have real data. You'll have a mix of things. I think this is going to be harder than the generative AI components, to be honest with you. You're going to have to figure out how to mix and match all this and bring it together. But that's the key. A lot of people are talking about generative AI being used for chatbots and such. In most cases, that isn't going to work very well, because you don't want every customer getting a different answer that is not only different, but probably wrong. So the key themes: generative AI, broadly deployed, it's here to stay. This talk of cutting it off, it's not going to happen. Integration within products is advancing rapidly. Companies like Adobe. Tons of legal battles and regulation are near-term certainties, and they're already happening. They're going to continue, and we'll hopefully get this figured out. I went through a number of misperceptions about generative AI and how it works you need to be aware of, and the apps that are built on top of it are going to be the differentiators. A lot of the underlying models will just kind of be commodities that people plug into. And with that, I've got my my contact information here, and I hope you all found it useful. Thanks so much for having me.
Greetings, everyone. A warm welcome to 2023 HPCC Systems Summit. My name is Bahar Fardanian, serving as the Solution Engineering Manager here at LexisNexis Risk Solution. In this session, I'm excited to introduce Gus Cawley, the founder and CEO of ZipApply. Gus will take us through his inspiring journey in establishing ZipApply and how he seamlessly integrated HPCC systems to his solution. So without further ado, let's extend a warm welcome to Gus. Gus, welcome, and thank you for joining us in this session.
Thanks, Bahar. It's an honor and privilege to be here. And hey, everyone, my name is Gus Cawley, and I'm a former Big Four CPA turned recruiter about 25 years ago, and I built several staffing firms, and my teams and I have been responsible for placing thousands and thousands of people and putting these people to work over the years. And along the way, I built ZipApply.com. Now, ZipApply is a productivity tool for job seekers. The ZipApply platform helps job seekers stand out and get noticed in the sea of job seekers. And at ZipApply, we're helping job seekers reach out and start the conversation with hiring managers at their target employers in the desired locations that they want to work in, whether that be within 5 to 10 miles of their house or in a different state or city. And we help job seekers tap into the hidden job market and get a better job. And this is a new opportunity switch in the marketplace for job seekers. Now, we do this by enabling job seekers to build their own personally branded pages, telling their stories, highlighting their skills, education, and experience. And then the job seeker can share their page with employers. Now, the job seeker can also include a video resume, which gives the employers an insight into their personality. it essentially replaces the first interview. An employer can then reach out and request an interview right on the page. You know, traditional methods of finding a job are not as effective as they once were.
Right.
Now the job seeker can take their success into their own hands. Now, here's a quick statistic, and I'm not sure if you know this, but on average, each corporate job attracts about 250 applicants, and only 4 to 6 of these applicants will actually get called in for an interview, and only one person gets the job. So how do you like those odds? You know, 1 out of 250 people. But in addition, I read a survey over the years. I read a survey that says 78% of job seekers, you know, after they get a new job, start thinking about their next job within 2 weeks of starting their new job, which tells me that job seekers are just settling. So that's how I started ZipApply with my origin story. Just basically, I surveyed 2,000 job seekers, and I asked them, I said, what's your biggest fear, frustration, or challenge with the job search? And the number one answer was the lack of feedback from employers. People would apply online for jobs, and they would never hear back. And then I said, well, hey, if you could wave a magic wand to fix it, what would you do? And the job seeker said, hey, listen, if I had the ability to reach out, connect directly with hiring managers, that would be great, because I think I could tell my own story better. And if I could just connect with them, I think I could close them on hiring me. So that's how I started on my quest. Around the same time, I was at an internet marketing seminar, and I heard the guy on stage was talking about video. And if you could apply video to your business, you could give yourself a unique advantage in the marketplace. So I'm like, hey, what if we could film video resumes and combine that with the job seekers page? And that's so you could have your My Personally branded page along with your video resume. And if you could put that all together and share the link with employers, I think that would be a game changer. And then if we gave the employer the ability to request an interview right on the page, I thought that would be a game changer. So that's how ZipApply got started.
Thank you, Gus. Thank you for introducing yourself and talking about ZipApply. And I do believe that understanding the market and what user needs is the foundation of any solutions. Your answer set the stage for my next question. Could you please elaborate a little bit on how you came across HPCC systems and what promoted you in incorporating this solution to your ZipApply company?
Yeah, so I was at a Tech Alpharetta function. I actually was presenting to the board of Tech Alpharetta, and I was presenting ZipApply, and I caught the attention of Arjuna Challa, and he basically was explaining to me about HPCC and how you could manipulate large amounts of data. And that's kind of how I stumbled upon HPCC. So I reached out to Arjuna after the meeting. He mentioned that your team could help me build a proof of concept. And this proof of concept showed me how the platform could handle and process huge amounts of data in a matter of seconds and return the results in real time. And they gave me the confidence to give it a try. So what I liked about HPCC is that there's no hassles of licensing, there's no contracts or going through different channels to get access to the software. So I hired a developer and we started working on the solutions. And with your team mentoring Vipin, our developer, we were able to get a proof of concept up in just a short period of time, just a matter of weeks.
Thank you, Gus. And I do remember those days as well. It wasn't that long ago when we started talking about your business ideas and your visions, and we onboarded Vipin. Speaking of Vipin, your ECL developer, as you mentioned, when we hired him, he didn't have any information about ECL, but he went through training and he picked up the knowledge pretty quickly and started putting solution in production. I want to know how you feel about his onboarding and him being able to put the first solution out within a few weeks.
Yeah, you helped me find Vipin. I went out and I did some recruiting. I found the candidate. You helped me screen him. And then he did not know ECL at first. He started learning it on his own, and he put the understanding of how HPC HPCC works to work. And with the help of the proof of concept that your team put together and your guidance, he was able to get things going pretty quickly. And for me, I'm not a tech guy, but seeing this happen really, really fast, I really felt like I found the right solution. Even though he was new to all this, the mix of his learning with what your team did and all the support that you gave us, we were able to get something up in the first few months. It's a great example of how dedication and teamwork, and we all came together to get something done really quickly. And as a businessman, this is a winning situation for me, that's for sure.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm really happy that our efforts paid off as well. My next question would be, now that we touched base on VPN and onboarding and putting a solution in production in a matter of weeks, could you please talk a little bit about how HPCC systems is integrated into your solution?
Put it simply, all of our big data processing takes place within HPCC. Now, there are a handful of automated API calls that are variables that the user can select, and Thor handles these calls. They retrieve the results, sends them through ETL processing, and then it performs its big data magic, which involves transforming and enhancing the data, building data sets or indexes for Roxy. Then ZipApply makes API calls to Roxy, grabs the results, and brings it back to the user all in real time in less than a second. So the API calls, what we're pulling is the elements of the quality of life score. So we're looking for air quality, cost of living, crime rate, unemployment, average income, and a number of different factors and variables that the user can put in before they even start searching for the title or function of the job. They can put in and start searching for the ideal quality of life location and then back into the job. And then we complement that with a zip code radius so the job seeker can find a job close to home. And then they don't have to do the long commutes, because Atlanta, for example, is known for its traffic. And you and I had spoken about this, about the commute times in Atlanta. In 2021, Atlanta, I think, was ranked like the 9th worst commute in the United States. But now I think it might be in the top 3. And I think you have a long commute, don't you?
I do. Mine is rather long.
So without traffic, how long does it take you to get to work?
Without traffic, it's a 30 miles. So without traffic, we're talking about 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
Right. And with traffic, how long does it take you to get to work?
You don't want to know. I want to say something around an hour and a half, if not longer.
Yeah. So an hour and a half each way, right? Is that correct?
I want to say no, but sometimes that could be accurate. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what the survey said was like 14% of Atlantans spend over an hour driving to work every day. And but if it rains, you throw the rain in the mix, then your commute could easily become 2 hours. And then I think you had mentioned that you have to pick your daughter up at school and drop her off. So I think, what were you spending? You spend an average of what, 3.5 hours a day in the car?
There are days that I spend 3.5 hours a day in the car. So that's pretty accurate as well.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the reasons I had built ZipApply as well, because, as you go down 400 or you're driving around 285 and you're listening to the radio and the news, the traffic reports, I mean, some of these mornings it could be a disaster. And I think a lot of the reason people are commuting these long distances is because they have no idea what companies are within 5 to 10 miles of their house. So that's one of the things that the ZipApply platform does. It enables job seekers to do a zip code radius around where they live, search for companies, and reach out to the hiring managers at those companies. Then they can share their My Resume page, highlighting their skill sets. And then in the grand scheme of things, all the jobs you see online, all the jobs from all the job boards only represent 20% of all the available jobs online. So that means 80% of jobs are not posted, which is called the hidden job market. So ZipApply enables the job seeker. This is an opportunity switch now, so they can put their success in their own hands and find these companies, tap into the hidden job market, and find the jobs that are not posted online. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what the platform does. It empowers job seekers. It's a productivity tool for job seekers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for walking us through how the platform is working within your solution. And I truly believe in your solution. It helps people that are new to market, like graduates from universities and people that are moving to United States and they don't have a good idea about what quality of life, as you mentioned, looks like in this situation.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I was just going to say, take, for example, transitioning military veterans, right? Maybe if someone's coming out of the Navy, and they're getting off a submarine or a ship, and traditionally, we place veterans, and traditionally, a veteran wants to move to the Sun Belt, someplace from Texas, maybe down to Florida, close to water. And our tool, with the help of HPCC, um, using the quality of life score, will help these veterans, these transitioning veterans and their spouses, to find places they want to live based on the quality of life, the air quality, crime rate, housing costs, average income, etc. And then once they figure out the location, then they can go and look for the ideal title or function of the position.
Very true. And thank you for explaining this to us, Gus. My last question is, what do you envision when it comes to the future of ZipApply and HPCC systems?
Yeah, so I'm excited about the future. We've already started adding more insights. As I peel the onion and learn more about what HPCC can do and its capabilities, we're allowing users to build lists and then get information on a list. So say you build a list of, say, financial analysts at a large company, say Home Depot. You'd be able to then figure out really quickly where the majority or where everyone went to college, their titles and experience and the degree types, all instantly. You could have an x-ray of a list. So you could create your own list and get an x-ray of it. And then also we're empowering employers by enabling them to post jobs. And when they post a job, they can share it online, but it also will query the database and bring back a short list of candidates that match the exact, they have the exact skill set that they're looking for. So it instead of an employer posting and praying that they're going to find the exact candidate they're looking for, it'll do a query and bring back a list that they can immediately do outreach to and proactively go after those candidates as well. So we're really excited about the future.
So we are, Gus. Thank you so much for walking us through your solution and your future plannings. As always, I really enjoyed chatting with you and listening to your ideas. And thank you again for joining us in this session.
Oh, thank you for having me. I very much enjoyed working with you and your team, and can't thank you enough for all your help. Appreciate it. So if you'd like to reach out and contact me, my email address is gus@zipapply.com, and the website is zipapply.com. I'd love to talk to you, answer any questions you might have. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Gus. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I am sure all of you have a better idea on what we do as a team when it comes to helping organizations or startups build and implement a big data solution. We are committed to making a difference, from managing your big data solutions to generating insightful results. If you are interested, and I am sure you are, please contact us to have a chat about your ideas and find out if HPCC system is a good fit for your solution. Our contact email is displayed on the screen. It is customer-solutions@hpccsystems.com, and our website is solutionslab.hpccsystems.com. My team and I are an email away to talk to you about your business ideas and the possibility of a proof of concept to showcase HPCC systems capabilities with regards to your visions and business needs. Thank you again for your time and attention, and here's to a fantastic day of conference.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Gus. I'm sure you'll agree with me that those were a couple of great talks. I hope Bill's talk on generative AI has set you thinking. Are there any ways you can use it in your own work or products you're working on? If so, why not propose it to somebody else? Your idea may not be quite as crazy as you think, and it may kickstart some fruitful discussions. Hopefully, you'll also have come away from the talk with a good idea of some of the pitfalls to watch out for. And thanks to Bahar and Gus from ZipApply. I'm always encouraged when I hear how the HPC Systems platform is solving real problems and helping our users innovate. And that theme of innovation leads into our next topic. If we're going to continue to help our users to innovate and make use of the latest technology, the platform also needs to keep adapting and innovating. So for the last part of this opening session, I'd like to give you an idea of what the team has been doing over this past year and highlight some of the key features and developments in the platform. I started preparing for this talk by looking through the changes that have been made in the last year. It turns out there were around 1,000 commits. Yes, many of them were trivial, but I reckon 10% was significant enough to be worth bringing to your attention. Now, no doubt you'll be very glad to know I'm not going to go through them one by one, but it did emphasize to me that there have been a lot of improvements. So maybe a better question than what's new is, why should you bother upgrading? Well, let's take a look. I reckon it's worth upgrading if you're running systems on the cloud. I hope it's clear to all of you that running HPCC on the cloud has been a continuing focus over the last year. It was highlighted several times in last year's conference, and we're dedicating one of the breakout streams later to it. Within LM Risk, we've been migrating many systems onto the cloud. We've continued to find situations where the reality of running on the cloud was not quite what we were expecting. Sometimes it was problems with the platform, but often it was just the result of running in a different environment with different characteristics which challenged our existing assumptions. To give you a flavour of the challenges, here are a few examples. Cloud providers like to reduce their running costs. It's only natural. So if you haven't used a network connection for a while, it makes perfect sense to power that adapter down. The only problem is that waking up the adapter is not instantaneous, and the first few network packets tend to get lost. You can easily imagine what problems that could cause, and it isn't something we encountered in our own data centers. So, as well as making the network communications more resilient, you can now also configure the keep alive setting on the sockets to prevent it happening. Kubernetes allows you to limit the memory and CPUs that each pod uses. That sounds great in theory, but again, we hit a couple of problems in practice. Until very recently, Kubernetes applied CPU limits using quotas, which could end up being very painful. What we found that sometimes, instead of proceeding at a steady pace, the performance was closer to somebody sprinting for a 20th of a second and then stopping to rest for the rest of the second because they've used up all their energy. But the problem was very hard to spot because from the outside, it appeared that the jobs were just running a bit slowly. Only when you looked at the kernel counters on the host machine did it become clear. In the end, we placed our own restrictions on the number of cores being used and changed the way the limits are applied to avoid this throttling. The strict memory limits imposed by Kubernetes highlighted a problem that had been in the system for many years. If all the data for a sort cannot be held in memory, then there's a stage in the sort process where it reads from a large number of compressed files at the same time, and that could cause excessive memory consumption. Now, on our bare metal systems, we often had enough spare memory to get away with it, but Kubernetes strictly enforced the limits, and when the pod used too much, it terminated the worker pod. All the user saw was jobs failing for no clear reason. Once diagnosed, it was relatively simple to fix the problem, but diagnosing it leads on to the next item. Better error reporting. When Kubernetes kills a pod, there is little indication why, and often the machine is reused quickly, so there's no trace of what had happened. That makes it very hard to debug. How do you work out what has happened? To help that, the system now monitors the pods, and if something goes wrong, it saves the system logs and other critical information to a persistent debug plane, making it possible to diagnose the root causes. Now, within the company, as we migrate some of our systems to the cloud, teams are comparing the performance of the cloud systems with the existing bare metal implementations. Some of those users noticed that graphs and subgraphs in Thor took much longer to start in the cloud than bare metal, even when a Thor instance was ready to process them. It wasn't immediately obvious why, but after some initial head-scratching and investigation, the delays turned out to be caused by file operations in Thor and Dali. I think I mentioned something similar last year. Operations that are almost instantaneous if the files are local had a large latency when they were remote. Those are just a few examples of the problems we've encountered, and the fixes for all of them are now part of the platform. So, if you're running a system on the cloud and you care about performance, resilience, cost, or being able to investigate problems, it's definitely worth upgrading. So, back to our question. Who else should upgrade? It's worth it if you're running systems on bare metal. Many of those cloud-related changes I just mentioned also benefit bare metal systems. And just as we have a breakout stream focusing on the cloud, we also have one looking at productivity improvements. Let's touch on a few of those now. The big change in version 9 was that the new ECL watch was enabled by default. I admit it takes a little getting used to, but once you do, I think you'll find it's worth it. It's built on the React framework, which provides a great base for adding enhancements in the future. Why not take a look at some of the videos on our website for more of an introduction? Parquet support is a great example of a community contribution because it was written by one of our summer interns. The Parquet plugin allows you to read and write Parquet files direct from your ECL code. In fact, Jack did such a great job as an intern that we offered him a job, and I'm glad to say he accepted it and is now working with the team on other parts of the platform. Over the last few years, there have been many improvements to SDL script, which allows you to define services in ESP. Improvements over the last year include support for masking, tracing, error handling, and some detailed documentation to make sure you can get the most out of it. The aim is to provide you with all the functionality you need without having to code anything. The NLP++ plugin has also gained quite a lot of interest from the community, attracting several internships this year. Recent improvements allow you to deploy new analyzers using a manifest, which improves the whole development cycle. If you're interested in processing textual data, then why not take a look at the 2 breakout sessions later today, exploring how that is being used. And often services presented to a customer are implemented internally as multiple services or microservices. Very quickly, you'll discover systems where ESP calls Roxy, which calls out to other ESPs or third-party services. If there's a problem with a query, it can be hard to tie all these calls together to locate the calls. That's the problem that OpenTelemetry helps solve. By passing trace and span IDs between the services, the complete picture for the query can be reconstructed. Version 9.4 of the platform preserves and creates those traces and span IDs, and will provide more OpenTelemetry features in the future. This last item is a small improvement which some will find very useful, but it's also slightly embarrassing. Everything that was needed for the contents of zip files to be sprayed directly had been there for years, but there were 1 or 2 gaps which prevented it working. It was only when somebody asked me if it was possible that we tried it and quickly fixed the problems. So, as you can see, if you're running on bare metal, there's some good reasons for you to upgrade. So, So far, we have cloud users and bare metal users. Who else should upgrade? Well, anyone who's interested in investigating performance. You can now obtain more information about Roxy queries. If that's your area of interest, then please watch my breakout session later today, which covers the topic in a lot more detail. Our Thor deployments on the cloud are using servers with local NVMe drives to provide some quick storage for spill files. But that storage has got a fixed size. How much space does a cluster need to be able to run the Thor jobs? It was very hard to answer that question before, but Thor now tracks the peak spill usage throughout each graph, so you can optimize the number of Thor workers you can place on a single server. And the way Thor worker pods are distributed between servers is also important. If you have 19 pods on one server and one on another, then if nothing else, the bandwidth to the remote storage from the first server is likely to become saturated. But skew in that pod distribution can be very hard to diagnose, so Thor provides that information and generates a warning to help you spot problems early. Other improvements on this list came about as we investigated the performance of particular queries. The extra information was often added to help us diagnose the causes. And we're improving the way that problems are reported to the user. Whether it's poor configuration, Kubernetes not distributing pods evenly, disks becoming full, or other system errors. By making them as visible as possible and highlighting them within ECL Watch, they can be spotted and resolved more quickly. And good logging is often essential for tracking down problems. With cloud deployment, you can't rely on logging to local disks. We're continuing to improve the integration with Log Analytics and Grafana to simplify that task. So we have cloud, bare metal, investigating performance. You should also upgrade if you want to boost the performance of your Thor jobs or Roxy queries. Cloud deployments have a clear connection between the time a job takes and the cost to the company. There are plenty of improvements to Thor that were made to reduce the cloud costs, but will also boost the performance for bare metal. The same goes for some fairly significant changes to Dali in 9.4. The cloud version of Roxy already uses a better way of deciding which agent should process a request. That's now also used for bare metal, which should help the performance of Roxy under load. And there have been other improvements to indexes. Perhaps the one with the most exciting potential is the new index format. Again, if you want to find out more, then please watch my breakout session later today. And there are some more specialized improvements, like making sure that unresponsive servers are spotted as quickly as possible, ensuring initialization before Roxy goes live, and a consistent method for controlling all these performance options. So, upgrade if you want to investigate performance, or you want a performance boost, or you need to make sure your deployment is secure. Here are a few questions for you. Are you worried about exfiltration of data from your systems? Do you need to control which users are allowed to import and export data? Do you need to ensure that data can only be exported to a restricted set of landing zones? Or are you happy for your data to be copied anywhere? Do you need to restrict the services and IP addresses that a query is allowed to call out to? How about these? Do you need to make sure that vulnerabilities in libraries like OpenSSL have been patched? Do you need to be able to securely read data from another cluster? And finally, do you want to be able to manage all the certificates and keys needed to secure a system without having a nervous breakdown? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you really need to make it a priority to upgrade to the most recent version. So, upgrade if you care about security, but also if you don't like wasting your time. It's always frustrating when someone reports a bug and we discover it was fixed many months ago. All they needed to do was upgrade to a more recent version. Why would you choose to not upgrade and potentially waste time held up by a bug that has already been fixed? Even if you don't upgrade to the latest new major or minor version, make sure you're on the latest point release of a version that is supported. In just one example I can remember, the system was using a point release that was 6 months old, and the bug that was holding the team up has been fixed for more than 3 months. Also, what's your answer going to be if someone exploits a security vulnerability which already been patched but you haven't taken? If you don't ensure you're up to date, you may be wasting your time, or worse. A new version might also help if you're fighting problems in other areas. A couple of examples spring to mind. We've seen problems with Azure Kubernetes starting pods up when the storage is not yet available. Hopefully, Azure will fix the issue. But in the meantime, the system can now check and ensure that the storage is fully mounted before it continues. And you may find problems if you're connecting to old LDAP instances, that they may not support the ciphers used by modern versions of OpenSSL. If so, you'll need the options in the new versions to control those ciphers so that you can connect securely. I've already covered plenty of new features, but here are a few more that might be useful. If they solve a problem that you're facing, then that's going to save your time. The file details for an index now includes information about how much memory those indexes require. That can help you to optimize your cache sizes and improve the performance of your queries. And when you publish a Roxy package, you have the option to use a DFU work unit to update all the files. That makes it easy to track the progress copying and to guarantee all the files are available before the Roxy goes live. And final example, we had a user that needed to consume the AWS Cognito service from within their HPCC query. But the problem was that the Cognito service only supports form URL encoding. So the HTTP call was extended to support that form URL encoding. So invaluable if you need it. I could continue with more examples, but I think I'm going to run out of time and your attention span. So back to my list. If you don't fit into any of these categories, then I agree, it probably isn't worth you upgrading. But then again, I doubt you're using HPC systems at all. If that's the case, but you're a bit interested, why not take a look at the revamped online documentation? It's much improved and will soon be interactive, allowing you to directly run the examples, making it much easier to learn about the system. Well, I hope that has given you a taste for trying out the new version, and you're excited about discovering more in the breakout sessions later today. After the break, we have 4 sets of breakouts, including 16 talks across 4 different tracks. Whether your interest is in the cloud, productivity, programming, or you just want to see HPC systems in action, we've got you covered. There's no wrap-up session at the end of the day this year, but be sure to take a break midway through the schedule to catch the announcement of the 2023 Community Awards and poster competition winners. The awards will be followed by the afternoon keynote honouring our academic community and engagement. So now, go and make yourself a drink and take the opportunity to look at the rest of the programme and see what topics catch your interest. Thank you and have a great day.